Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, bringing you to our special program looking ahead 2023, rapid recovery from Beijing. After an arduous 3-year fight against COVID-19, China lifted the border restrictions on Sunday after easing its COVID-19 management. And the world is closely watching, with growing expectation, the reopening of its second-largest economy. China seeks GDP growth greater than 5% in the year 2023 as part of a strong economic rebound. Meanwhile, the country has gone on a path of fully opening up with big opportunities, many say, for the rest of the world. So how will the Chinese economy likely fare in 2023? What does rapid recovery in China mean for the world economy? For answers, let's loop in our panelists. For more on the Chinese economy, we are joined by Jim Rogers, chairman at the Rogers Holding in Singapore. Good to see you. In Hong Kong, Xiaogeng, director of the Institute of Policy and Practice with Shenzhen Finance Institute, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. In Shenzhen, in Beijing, Liu Zhiqin, senior researcher at the Chongyang Institute of Financial Studies. Welcome to the program. Jim, good to see you.
Thank you.
You earlier asked about when China will open up once again to the rest of the world. It seems that it's happening. Now, what's to follow? What's your expectation and observations?
Well, it seems to be happening from what I read. You're there, you would know better than me. But if it's happening, it's going to be a great boost to the world economy because China has a huge population and a lot of money to spend. And it's going to cause a boost, maybe temporary, but a boost to the world economy as China comes back on stream. And it will help China's economy, of course.
Now, of course, what does opening up to the rest of the world mean? It's always a sophisticated question, Jim. So when you are talking about China opening up again, what does that mean?
It means more demand for copper, for rice, for petrol, for the airlines, for hotels, for everything. I mean, whatever you do, go home tonight and see where you spend your money. That's where other people are spending their money. And all of those things are going to have an increase in demand.
Supply demands are going to be bigger as a result of this, and also the Chinese consumer powerful, certainly. Professor Xiao, to you, how is the Chinese economy likely to do in the next couple of months?
Well, I think this is a turning point because of several years of tightening and pandemic. So now we're going to see a rebound of the economy into the normal situation, and particularly in the service sector, which was hit very hard, and also in the housing sector, because that's a serious problem in terms of balance sheet shrinking. And I think monetary policy has already relaxing, so we are expecting a very strong recovery in a few months' time.
Mr. Liu, what are some of the areas that you think would create momentum for future growth, the Chinese economy, which would have an impact on the global economy?
I should say that in many sections that China will play a great role to support the economic recovery in the world. I still remember that when President Biden came back to the White House, he said to the world that America is bad. Now I should say China is bad because China has opened its market to the whole world, and all the industrial sections has again that restarted to be coordinated and to be merged with the global market. So especially in the real economy and the manufacturing and high technology. And the tourists also especially that will be inserted in the global communities.
For China, there has to be efforts being devoted in tremendous terms, Professor Xiao, to protection and prevention of COVID-19, and now when the policy is being adjusted, there is a wave of Omicron in China, and that has not stopped yet at this moment. So one is going to the prevention, control, and the medical resources. The other, of course, is working on the economy. How do you see these two tasks likely to be juggled by the Chinese side?
The young people and most of the working age people, they are already basically able to deal with it. So the major problem is the old people.
You mean they're already back to work, like what we are doing right now?
Right. So I think in terms of the economy, we can expect back to normal very soon. But in terms of a group of people, like old aged people and people with already some problems, they are struggling, and I think that's a short-term burden, and it's going to affect certain service sector. But in the medium run, it's not really a big challenge.
Jim, from observing from afar, where you are, Singapore, you also see the country like Singapore, South Korea, New Zealand, for example, opened up the borders later than most of the quote-unquote the Western countries. People have a different time and calendar in terms of the amount of challenges they have to deal with and the types of it. How do you read the current stage China is working on, and how is that likely to work with China's urgency to boost its economy?
Well, Tianwei, we can already see in Singapore an opening and a big increased demand for travel, tourism, restaurants, hotels, airlines. It's already happening in a big way, and it's mainly because of China now. The rest of the world sees what's happening, and they say, we better hurry too. And so many people who want to travel know they have to travel now. So those parts of the world economy fed by China are doing extremely well, but in China too. I mean, people are going out again, restaurants, etc. But another sector, unfortunately, is medical care. Medical care, healthcare in China is having a big boost right now because of the pandemic. So some parts of the Chinese economy, and therefore the world economy, are going to be very strong for a while.
One of the complexities that we are facing today, Mr. Liu, is quote-unquote the legacy of recent years, geopolitics, ever-fragmented world. So with this as the backdrop, everybody is struggling, but to China, some say it could be particularly so. So, Mr. Liu, your thoughts on this?
I think for China, we really have a very different challenges, different from the other countries. When we are talking about the economic recovery, first of all, we have to see whether the market recovery is come back. The market recovery come back should see that the business activities really come back. All these factors were combined together to build up a system that whether our economy can well develop. If the business activity recovered, and I think the market recovery will come back, and then the economic recovery also will come back logically. So this is not easy that when we're talking about the economic recovery, we have to rebuild up our supply chain. You know, what happened to China in the past 2 years? We lost a lot of share of market in the global community because some Western countries took over this time period that to fill the gap that China absent from this time. So all this need China to push more pressure and the momentum to stimulate, to upgrade our economic development. Otherwise, we will take a long time to get so-called economic recovery because the recovery should be contributed to the world economy. So this is very important.
What about some of the very important questions that China raised for itself in the earlier years when it comes to the potential and sustainability of economic growth? For example, a supply side structural reform. For example, how to work on the global supply chains where things are getting ever more complicated. For example, how to build the confidence of Chinese consumers and those who are working and doing business with China. These are fundamental questions that need to be addressed one would say, of course, there are priorities at the time, but how to see these very sustainable questions vis-a-vis priorities and urgencies, Professor Xiao?
Well, I think the key is really to realize that China's exports may not so strong because of geopolitical problem. But our internal domestic economy has tremendous potential. The private sector was hit very, very hard. And a lot of regulatory restrictions needs to be gone, in the next few months, and also the local government, their incentives should be strengthened. So I think in terms of investment and the consumption, more emphasis needs to focus on liberalization because the Chinese economy has tremendous potential. But the last 3 years has been very difficult because of pandemic and the geopolitics. And now I think it's time to focus on the so-called internal circulation. Some of the debt problem actually is not so serious in China compared to other countries. So China should have much more space for monetary, physical, and the regulatory relaxation. And that, I think, is the reason I think we should be optimistic because the government has already started the process, but I think still has a lot of space to continue.
The world is changing fast, taking all our lives with it. But we can change it too, by seeking answers to problems through discussions and debates. On World Insight, I ask direct questions to real people in the know, seek genuine answers, but respect diverse perspectives. Our live global debates tackle the most critical issues head-on. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines. Healthy internal circulation, sustainable internal and external circulation, if we use these Chinese terms, probably is the way to go. Mr. Liu, on that, how do you see these internal circulation under the current circumstances could be healthy and could pave the way for future economic growth in a healthy way once again?
At this moment, China should play a greater role or give more efforts to stimulate the internal circulation. This internal circulation depends on the business activities and the transportation and the delivery of goods, especially the regional context and the connections should be connected without any problems. As in the past 3 years, we have met so many obstacles in the internal circulation. I think the last year, many foreign companies in Shanghai, in Guangdong, and in Beijing, that they complained that the lockdown of this transportation make their business in a very difficult time. Nowadays, I think that everything is trying to get improved. The internal circulation is getting more smoothly and very stable.
Mr. Rogers, listening to your colleagues earlier, your thoughts, reflections?
Well, I know that China internally is certainly going to grow very rapidly now because everything has been closed. I was there a month or two ago and I could see how closed everything was. People will go out again and they will buy a new shirt. They will do something. They will buy new socks, if nothing else. So internally, things are going to get better, but also externally, I mean, as China opens up, there will be more travel. As I said before, in Singapore, we already see an increase in the demand for people to travel to Singapore, but that means everywhere. The Chinese are now wanting and going to travel everywhere, and they will trade everywhere. And I hope that China will continue to open up. I've told you many times that the one shortcoming I have with China is they need to continue to open up. They've done a brilliant job in the last 40 years. Let's go further. Let's open everything. Let's open your markets totally.
Now, on the future growth, there are several points that all of you mentioned. For example, about technology, for example, about green development. They used to be thought as the future engines for economic growth. Now, where are we now, Professor Xiao?
Well, I think now China is in a quite good situation in the sense that we recognize our weakness because actually the U.S. sanctions. So a lot of investment is already going to those the weak part of the supply chain. So in terms of opening up now, it's really a very good time. In 1992, China really started to open up FDI, foreign direct investment. Now we are opening up the so-called portfolio investment. So a lot of money actually are coming into China from overseas. So I think China is quite seriously trying to follow a lot of experiences in other countries, focusing on technology, focusing on infrastructure, and focusing on the quality of life, including the green development. And all this is pushing China towards a normal, middle-income country. I think that's a good sign.
Now, Mr. Liu, your thoughts? Same question.
I think that China is at the middle way of the development at this stage, because I think China has already announced that China has a full supply chain. It's the best supply chain in the world. But now they found that something's changed because some Western countries try to decouple from China. And also, I should say, 2023 is the most difficult year for China. If China can overcome all difficult challenges this year, I think next year, the 2 years that China will be better. Why? Because in the first year, Western countries tried to decouple. The second year, for the Western country, they try to rebuild their coupling. And the third, all this coupling, new coupling, they will be working in the net. So this is a very serious challenge for China. That's why nowadays we find that many Chinese companies, they lost some orders from Western. This is why in the last 2 months or 3 months, all this export dropped so greatly, because all these orders already transferred to the other suppliers. So this is a very serious challenge for China. We should be aware the real situation and put forward a real policy to support all this economy.
Mr. Rogers, your colleagues certainly feel the urgency and also shall I say, the challenge, tremendous challenge facing China this year. Your thoughts?
Well, China produces tens of hundreds of thousands of engineers every year, many more than the United States does. And many of those engineers are going to be extremely good. I mean, look at Tencent. You know the name. Look at Baidu. Something is going right in China. A lot of those engineers are smart, motivated, ambitious, and hardworking. And China is showing that to the rest of the world. There's going to be more of it. I hope that China will not close off. I hope that more 18-year-olds will be sitting in their room on their computer and coming up with new ideas, which will change the world. And I hope that Beijing will encourage that. The more that people engage with the outside world, the better off China is, the better off the outside world is. You have a lot of smart people. Look at Chinese history. Where do you think all those great accomplishments came from? They didn't come from Italians. They didn't come from Germans. They came from Chinese. And it is happening again.
Professor Xiao, Mr. Liu, if you look at what is going on right now, it's not just about trade. It's not just about the economic recovery. It is really about what kind of the world we want, what kind of China we are aspire to build together with the rest of the world. and what kind of future we together want, actually, with the rest of the world. I think it seems to be at a very critical juncture. To you, besides the numbers, the sheer numbers we're looking at, because the GDP growth rate is very much likely to exceed 5, and some even suggest 5.5, despite all of the challenges we mentioned earlier. So the thing is, it's not a small chess for this year. It's a big chess, and it's a bigger goal for the future, which this year will certainly lay a very important foundation. So on that, I want to have your thoughts.
I think at the moment, first is important thing for China, we should be optimistic. But the second is very important also that we should become more reality, because we should know that the real challenges we are facing. Of course, we see that China's history has showed again that China's economic resilience and also China's the goodwill and the determination to develop our economy. But we should be more reality that the pressure from Western countries will be more severe than ever before. They could not lift their pressure on China, for instance, decoupling and protectionism and other ways that against China in all fields. That for China is really, we have to be aware that the real situation. We should not be so naive. We should be more reality. We should be reunited again together closely, that to fight all these different forces try to sustain China from its own developed road. So in this way, that China can further develop according to its design, according to its plan.
Well, I think China is at a turning point in the sense that we are now pretty strong in terms of manufacturing. But what the challenge for the future is really the lifestyle and the business environment. And here, I think Hong Kong is a very good example for the future of China. I think China, of course, needs to prepare for national security, geopolitics, those. But the major challenge is really to make the Chinese people happy, and also to let the companies to have opportunity to take a risk. China is too conservative, in my view, in terms of exploring lifestyle and business venture. And I think there's tremendous potential for China to contribute to its own country, but also to the world in terms of lifestyle and also business, technology innovation, business venture. Here, I think everybody is looking at Chinese leaders, for more opening.
Mr. Rogers.
Well, I would agree 100%. It's lifestyle, but that technology leads lifestyle. China is becoming a world leader in technology. You know this as well as I do, and I hope that will continue. You can outperform America, you can outperform Japan, because you have enough people, enough smart people, ambitious people, but to do that, you have to let everybody have their head and let them go to the bar and the disco and dance if they want to, because that leads to new and different ideas. Let them travel. That leads to new thoughts. If they travel to a new country and they see new things, they act, and it leads to new ideas, and China can continue to grow, continue to succeed, and continue to lead the world.
Right.
But you have the brains, you will have the technology, do not cut it off.
We have seen the world's developing over the past decades and beyond. Usually, one part of the world economy getting better at the expense of the other parts. And that has been going on for some time. Now, how do we now work for a potential in which we are to develop not at the expense of the others, but rather with others, bringing everybody on board? Now, I know that has been talked about by rhetorics for decades and hundreds of years, but those remain in rhetorics. How to make it a reality Do you think that should be the question that we should be thinking about and working on to make ourselves a much better self, and also not at the expense of the others? The goal of economic development, is it for competition, or is it for a better future for most of us? I think that's a philosophical question from a humble me. Mr. Rogers.
Well, again, all you have to do is open up. Look at what's happened in China in the past 40 years. It's an entirely different world because you expose yourself to the outside world and you learn and you adapted. And look at what's happened. That will continue. Yeah. If China continues to open up, you know, a few hundred years ago, the emperor closed China off and you went into decline. Now, Deng Xiaoping started opening up. Look out the window. Look out the window. That China did not exist 40 years ago, and it will continue. But please, yes, some countries in the West are starting to close off. China should not retaliate. China should continue to open up, because in the long run, that's how you become more prosperous and successful.
Short notes from Mr. Liu and Professor Xiao. Mr. Liu.
I think for China, we have a really serious challenge in the time to come. And as we know, that China is facing a lot of problems because the huge population is a big challenge. And also now China is still under modernized. It's not a modernized society. We need a lot of efforts to do more things. And the third is very important, how to keep balance between rich and poor people. This is also a big challenge for China, different from other countries.
Okay.
And the fourth is very important, that how to make a balance of the pandemic control and economic development. I'm sure that this year, pandemic is still another big issue for China.
Yeah.
So how to keep calm, how to keep coordinated with each other.
Professor Xiao, briefly, please.
Yeah, I think that the key is to focus on people, people's lifestyle, people's happiness. You know, that I think is a shared objective for every country.
Xiao Geng, Liu Zhiqian, last but certainly not least, Jim Rogers. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. All the best. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us.